everybody, and welcome to Wrestling with Statistics, where we look at the world of professional wrestling through the unique perspective of stats and analytics. I am your host, Ryan Neitzey, and with me, as always, is the man behind Pro Wrestling Musings, Craig Leask. Craig, how are you doing, friend?
Doing great, yeah. I'm really glad that I've got no aches and pains today. Anything like shoulder based, that's really good.
This feels like a direct call out to me, and I don't know how I feel about it. What I do know is I feel pain about it directly in my shoulder. Yeah, I woke up this morning and I don't know what happened, but like it's like right at the shoulder basically, where it's like it's in pain, and I'm slightly concerned because like usually sometimes people sleep on it. I don't know how I would have slept on my shoulder weird, but what I'm concerned about is that like I have like not shooting or anything, but like there's this like the I'm not a doctor, so I don't know. But I have like a little like those little quirk lightning things on like my tricep and then like right by my thumb. So I don't know what's happening with my arm. I think I'm dying. I think I'm gonna come on here next week and my arm's gonna be cut off. We're hoping for the best at this point. 2 episodes in, one of your hosts is already falling apart.
All my body parts seem to be fine, so I don't really have much to add to that.
There's really no transition out of, dude, how are your body parts going, Greg? Yes, we're going to go dive into the shoulder stats of each AEW wrestler.
I think we need to leave it now.
Well, thank you everybody for, coming back for our second episode of Wrestling with Statistics. We had a huge success with the first episode.
Staying past the shoulder chat.
Yeah, staying past the shoulder chat is trial number 2. But thank you everybody for coming back, or even if you're a new listener, we greatly appreciate it. Last week was episode 1. We're coming back yet again with shoulder pain and all. Man, I really just stopped with the shoulder pain bit. But yeah, thank you everybody for coming back. We're very excited to be back for a second week, and we got a decent amount of stuff to talk about, I think, Craig.
Yeah, absolutely. We're gonna talk about whether punching your opponent a lot leads to winning a wrestling match.
Yes, and the results may surprise you, and that's what we call a tease in the biz. I don't know if you know that too much, but we got a little rundown here real quickly. We'll go over just a little, I guess, when you open up a book, the table of contents page. I'm just going to do a quick table of contents for you folks. We got, of course, we're going to talk about some of the stats from an AEW match, that one being Jon Moxley versus Frankie Kazarian. And then we're going to lead into some sort of a look-see at the upcoming AEW World Title match, Moxley versus Brodie Lee, since that was announced. We do have a second scatter plot for you, and of course, if you always want to see those scatter plots, they should be in the description of the podcast you're listening to, or if you go and listen or view our YouTube channel of Hit the Books, you can see the video portion of the show, which all shows all these graphs and everything, which were really helpful.
It actually works really well. I was impressed how you set that up. It fits together really nicely.
Thank you, Craig. I mean, of course, we did it together. We nailed it perfectly. But we got another scatter plot for you, which Craig sort of alluded to. We're going to touch down on the AEW League Tables as we get closer and closer to Double or Nothing. And then we got a little discussion, if time permitting, we have a little discussion talking about NXT, specifically the title matches that happened last week on NXT. So let's start off, Craig. Let's look at these Moxley Kaz stats. Jon Moxley versus Frankie Kazarian happened last week on AEW Dynamite, which was, of course, their return to live programming, but also the return of SCU to, and I guess also Moxley to AEW in a very long time. So after watching this match, what were some things that you pulled out of this bout, Craig?
So it was another Jon Moxley match where, as the AEW champion, so this was the 10th match he's won in a row in 2020. So he's on a 10-match winning streak, which is, that's very impressive. That's a strongly booked wrestler, strongly booked character. But what's really fascinating about the way that AEW are booking Jon Moxley is he's the champion. He's won 10 matches in a row. He's hard as nails. Babyface champion, takes on all comers, but statistically, there's no real stat that you can pull out to kind of explain how he's been booked strongly. He's not get hitting numbers for strikes, grapples, diving maneuvers, submissions, even the amount of finishes he's pulling out that would suggest that he should be winning all these matches. They're not painting a picture of him as a tremendous wrestler via the numbers, except for one statistic, which is perhaps unsurprising, in that he's the man in AEW that takes more damage than anybody else. He's going through matches, taking a huge amount of offense from pretty much all of his opponents, except for perhaps somebody like Fabu Andre, who we'll come back to in a second. Best name in wrestling. Fabu Andre, just to repeat that, Fabu Andre. Anyway, so yeah, Jon Moxley versus Frankie Kazarian. Jon Moxley picking up 47% of the offense in the match, taking 53% of it from Kazarian. And again, this mimics Jon Moxley in AEW. He's going into matches and taking a lot from his opponents.
Yeah, conversely, not just in the offense, but also that strike down rate. Jon Moxley looking at 10% of a strike down rate versus Kaz's 18%. Yeah, no, Jon Moxley, he has always been, he's not like presented like a dominant, brooding figure. He is a guy that he is, maybe not the best, numbers wise, the best like technical wrestler or anything. But really, what AEW is presenting him as through these numbers and through these stats is that he is a fighter. He is, maybe he's not the most technical wrestler, but he is a guy that will go out there. He'll take whatever punishment he's given, but he's going to, be resilient. Which of course, there's that offensive taken is really what that stat sort of telling us is how resilient these people are.
In terms of like his average across all of his AEW matches, Jon Moxley's sort of percentage of offense is 45%. So he's averaging 45% in a match. And then kind of to paint a picture of like, and when you look at other sports, there's kind of, you have to manage how many football games your players are playing. And if if you're going into a football match and one team has played 30 games that season, the other game has 20, then one of the teams are going to be fresher. So Jon Moxley has taken more offensive moves than anybody else in AEW one-on-one matches, 359 offensive moves, a full 101 more than the next competitor, which is Cody Rhodes, he's taken 558 moves in AEW one-on-one matches in 2020.
Yeah, I mean, Moxley, it's weird. It's weird thinking of someone that's like, his character is someone that's very badass, right? And then looking at it, it's
10 wins in a row. That's dominant.
To be clear, that is 10 wins in a row out of 10 matches of 2020. So he is undefeated. So it's like he's this badass, he's undefeated, but it's like, oh, but he gets his butt kicked a lot in this promotion. Yeah. I mean, just looking at this Moxley Kazarian match, he did come out with more strikes in this bouting. Outing? That's a combination of bout and outing.
Yes.
I think is what I did. But he Kazarian had more strike downs, had more dives, way more submissions, submission seconds specifically. More reversals, but of course it was Moxley's finisher that ended up getting the victory. Kaz, looking at the flow of offense here, it's Kaz is very consistent. Moxley gets a big old number there right in the middle of the graph there, but Kaz is very consistent, constantly going in, constantly going after Moxley. It is interesting as well because Kaz is normally a tag team wrestler in All Elite Wrestling. In fact, the first ever tag team champion in All Elite Wrestling. yet he is giving the AEW World Heavyweight Champion a run for his money. Granted, also a lot of other people apparently give Moxley a run for his money, but it's what's nice about that, stepping outside of the whole thing and stepping into like the storyline stuff is like allowing this sort of thing of like Moxley getting the win, but always getting his ass kicked in these matches. It allows us to be like, oh, Frankie Kazarian's a little pretty much good of a singles wrestler. He's taking advantage of all this stuff. And then go all the way going back to like Jeff Cobb, Santana, Ortiz. It's like, oh, there's they're getting their licks in. We're seeing a lot about these singles guys. But Moxley, of course, is the guy that eventually gets the win.
Yeah, and that seems to be his MO. He's just like a punching bag that you can't, or you just can't get past him, and then eventually he comes out on top when you're knackered, tired, and have expended all your energy hitting him repeatedly, and then when you're absolutely exhausted, he just takes you out essentially.
That's probably the story right there is that he takes the punishment and then just finishes you with I was going to say the dirty deeds paradigm shift. And conversely, compared to Lance Archer, who we talked about last week, who's a guy that also takes a lot of punishment, but it's that sort of punishment he asks for.
It's a bit different. Yeah,
it's a bit different, like story dynamic on top of that is Archer's asking for this punishment. He's asking to get punched or whatever, but then he just hits the person and knocks him down. Moxley, he's not hitting people and knocking them down. He's just really just taking it. He is, like you said, a punching bag that once you're tired, he'll just end you right then and there. He's like what is it? He's like Homer Simpson in that one Simpsons episode back in the day where Homer was a boxer, where it was the whole episode was just Homer, for whatever reason, could just take a bunch of punches to the head and then just do one punch and then he wins the bout.
I was racking my head to find a comparison somewhere because I'm sure I'd seen that story before of the guy that just exhausts his opponents via taking everything they can give and then capitalizing at the end. Is it The Simpsons? Is that where I've remembered that from?
I feel like that's at least where I remember it from. I surely there's been like plenty of other cartoons and stuff that pulls it from.
Looney Tunes. I think Looney Tunes did it as well.
I wouldn't be surprised, honestly. Yeah. It's weird that all of the comparisons are coming from cartoon shows. I don't know what
that Jon Moxley has gone from hardest man in the room to cartoon character.
Yeah, I feel like maybe that's what we're insinuating slightly. I'll say as a distance, like Moxley, please don't attack me. No, Moxley, he's a punching bag that when you are tired, he strikes with that paradigm shift, which is very interesting. And then, it also goes into his, unsanctioned matches, whether they are fined or not. They goes into that aspect where he takes a lot of punishment and then he ends up, getting the victory. He's someone that can take barbed wire to the back and still pull out a victory.
Yeah, absolutely. And I believe in that match, Kenny Omega was completely on top. And I think at the end of that, I said that Kenny Omega had gotten drunk on violence, and that was the reason that he lost. But now seeing Jon Moxley in AEW for longer, it's the same pattern. In fact, in that match, Jon Moxley only had 42% of the offense compared to Kenny Omega's 58%.
Wow.
So it's the same thing. Kenny Omega threw everything at him until he threw that Phoenix splash on the wood that ultimately led to his defeat. So yeah, it fits the story. It fits how Jon Moxley's being booked. His opponents get more and more desperate until they overextend, and then he just clips them, takes them out.
Yeah. Well, let's look at another wrestler individual that also is a very dominant force in AEW, and that is, of course, Brodie Lee, the Exalted One, leader of the Dark Order.
Yeah.
He's officially challenged, which has been accepted by Moxley to fight for the AEW World Heavyweight Title at Double or Nothing. Um,
Uh,
and yeah, I'm excited for it because looking at these stats and numbers and everything, it's very interesting. There's a lot of interesting aspects to it. What are some things that come out to you, Craig, about this upcoming match between Moxley and Brodie Lee?
so the obvious caveat to make is that Brodie Lee's the numbers that we have for Brodie Lee is from the 4 matches that he's competed in AEW. But those 4 matches have been against QT Marshall, Lee Johnson, Justin Law, and Marco Stunt.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not the most challenging matches. In comparison to Moxley, his last 4 matches have been Kazarian, Hager, Fabu Andre,
Yeah.
um, and and Chris Jericho. So the Moxley's had 3 sorry, Fabu, 3 established wrestlers to go against.
How dare you? How dare you say that about
Whereas,
hometown hero Fabu Andre? I
whereas
think. I
Brodie
assume he's from
Lee,
Atlanta.
Brodie Lee, I don't know, like you're looking, who's Marco Stunt, QT Marshall are his biggest opponents so far. So it's different standard. Um, Moxley, we've got like 2 hours of wrestling for his statistics, whereas Brodie Lee, it's under 10 minutes. So it's, the numbers don't really carry a huge amount of weight yet. But in those 10 minutes, Brodie Lee has his pace of offense is superior to Moxley's in terms of strikes, grapples, dives, finishers, the amount of pins that he goes for. He is outscoring Moxley in terms of that. He doesn't use submissions, whereas Moxley does. That might fit the story of the match. Moxley trying to go for a leg, that kind of thing. That would make sense. But yeah, I think the looking at Brodie Lee, big dominant guy, he's going to be throwing around a lot of offense, but he's going in there against the human punch bag. He's going in against AEW's Homer Simpson. And it's
I want that on a shirt. That's what I want. AEW's Homer Simpson.
So yeah, Moxley he's resilient and he'll just wait, and Brodie Lee might get angry and start hitting things with chairs or shouting at his minions out of frustration, and then Moxley could just nip in there with a finisher. So although you could suggest Brodie Lee is the favorite, John Moxley has a track record at doing this. He's taken everything that Kenny Omega had. He's taken everything that Pac had. He's taken everything that Chris Jericho had, and absorbed it and won repeatedly 10 times in a row. I think it's going to be Moxley, isn't it?
I mean, not just Chris Jericho. You can say he took everything that the entire inner circle had, including outside freelancer Jeff Cobb. Yeah,
and a lot of this with one eye.
Yes, and very much correct on that front. Yeah, John Moxley, of course, like you said, Brodie Lee has way smaller matches. Like you said, his average match length is 2 minutes and 22 seconds. Even if Moxley's was 17 minutes. Even if you take out his world title matches, his last 4 were 9 minutes and 42 seconds. Still incredibly much longer than Brodie Lee's.
That's more than Brodie Lee's total.
Yes, that's more than his total time. So yeah, obviously there's the caveat that like Brodie Lee's, per hour numbers here are a little bit what's the word? I guess stunted a little bit, inflated than Moxley's, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff to go into Moxley. Of course, he's the punching bag, but then there's also, I remember, I would have to look it up real quick just to cite my source, but I remember a recent interview where Moxley teased the idea of potentially trying to do more like MMA submission stuff in his matches.
All right. Yeah.
Which is interesting, especially against someone like Brodie Lee. If Moxley's whole plan of attack is really to take as much offense while wearing down the opponent, and while the opponent's eating or attacking and stuff, you can wear down the opponent in that sense. Throwing in more MMA style submissions and whatnot is just gonna wear down your opponent even faster. So it's a smart move.
Like he was more like that in Japan.
Yes, he was. Yes, he was.
Because his whole thing in Japan was he was like this. He was still this kind of like crazy guy, but he spoke a lot in the back about having a plan, and the commentary really put him over as having lots of different plans. So there would be matches like the one with Ishii where it was quite weapon based, but there was another. Was it against Tanahashi? Was Tanahashi even in the same group as him? I might be wrong, but
I don't think so.
No. But yeah, he tapped somebody out in Japan with some kind of knee bar type move during the G1.
Yeah, no, he's
different.
Especially with the fact that here we go. Uprocks is what that article was. Because he went through a bunch of Jon Moxley went through a bunch of MMA training for his upcoming movie. Which will come in at some point. I believe it's called The Cage Fighter. Anyways, this article, this link, whatever website linked me to Uprocks, it just linked me to the normal page of Uprocks, not like the actual article. Terrible link. Yes, but he mentioned the idea of, he's did a lot of MMA training for the movie, so he's interested in including some into his arsenal. But it makes complete sense with the character Moxley we have presented in front of us. Brodie Lee, he is, unlike Archer, where Archer was asking for punishment, Brodie Lee is someone that is not asking for punishment. He's just going in and destroying people. Total offense 247, per hour. Offense taken 44 versus Jon Moxley's 202.
Slight differences there.
Oh boy, strike down rate 41% compared to Moxley's 13.
In fact, Brodie Lee has taken 7 moves in AEW, and those will all just be like strikes.
Wow,
that he's returned tenfold. 85% average. 85% average offense in the match.
And of course, the caveat, these are short matches against your Justin Laws and stuff. Yeah. But yeah, he even in those short time matches, he's someone that is dominating, which is maybe potentially scary. The idea, I guess, would be previewing going into this match. Can Brodie Lee's domination, sheer domination, outrun Moxley's perseverance?
Jon Moxley tapped out Shingo Takagi.
That's who it was. Yes. Wow.
Yeah.
That's a victory. That's a huge victory. I guess at the time, this was the G1, right?
Yeah.
I guess at the time, Shingo was still considered a junior.
Yeah, he was kind of a junior, but also not.
But of course, like they always joked about, he was a junior where the scales seemed to be broken.
Yeah, it's huge.
He's like, this guy's pretty big for a junior. Yeah, I mean that's still a huge victory over Shingo Takagi. But yeah, the question here is, can Brodie Lee's sheer domination outdo Moxley's perseverance? It's a tough one to call. If Moxley can, wear down Brodie Lee even more, who knows? I mean, again, you never know. Brodie Lee is the leader of the Dark Order. There are, I didn't count how many people, but definitely eight people that were just destroying Moxley.
The new guy is called 10.
10, yes. I assume I was trying to think of like who is what number. Like in my head, I was like, I guess Evil Uno and Stu Grayson are 1 and 2. And then there was I remember on, I think it was a Dark where there was like a 7 and 8.
Yes.
But I don't remember who was 9. So it's sort of like, who's this person?
They've like had 9 in a match or anything yet.
Yeah. So I was like, who are these people? I kind of like the idea that there's no 9s, because it was just like, oh, there's these more people that we just don't know about.
Like the pig thing in what was that on Veronica Mars? I think they were doing a prank where they had 3 pigs and they labeled them 1, 2, and 4, so that they'd be looking for the third.
That's a great distraction attempt.
Everybody's always worried about number 9 popping up, but there is no number 9.
There is no number 9. Oh man, that'd be so great. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Brodie Lee was just like, yeah, there's no number 9. Why not? Why would there be?
He just doesn't like number 9.
I mean, with the, I guess, character of Brodie Lee so far.
Yeah, just like really strong opinions about random stuff.
Just, I wonder if he's basing off anyone. Anyways, Brodie Lee, Moxley, there's always the aspect of, will people in the Dark Order be involved in the match in any capacity? Mm-hmm. You always got to think about that.
It fits Moxley's character as well. He had to withstand the whole inner circle. There's 5 of them. Mm-hmm. He's to withstand 10 of them.
Yeah, I mean, even going into looking at his character is like he gets beaten down at the end of last week's AEW Dynamite. Mauled by a bunch of people, and then when he answers Brodie Lee's challenge, he's just like sort of laughing and like, you should have just asked. You could have just asked. And it shows that like he just took a beating, but he's just like laughing and like, yeah, whatever. I'm still going. Which is what directly shows in these stats, which is very interesting, which is what I love doing about the show already, is that already it's like the character moments and the strikes and stats and everything already match up with a lot of people, which is a very good job by these wrestlers, I guess. Let's move into the next topic of conversation, which was the scatter plot that you have presented this week again, a new scatter plot. Mm-hmm. Talk us through this. We're looking at it right now. Talk us through this, Craig.
So their idea kind of is that so I took their win-loss record and I did a scatter plot, kind of their win-loss record versus overall offense, kind of based off the idea that Jon Moxley is winning, but he's having a real hard time in his matches to get those wins. Is that a rule? Do they book too many kind of resilient underdog wins, or is Jon Moxley an anomaly? And yes, Jon Moxley is an anomaly. The correlation is if you get more stuff in your matches, you're more likely to win, which shouldn't be too much of a surprise. Mm-hmm. So I thought we could go into kind of more of the stats and see like what are the keys to winning in AEW. So what we've got this week is wrestlers' strike rate per hour. So if you take their numbers and multiply it up to be an hour's worth of wrestling, or take their numbers and average it out over an hour, does a better strike rate, getting more strikes in a match, does that lead to the victory or not? And one would suspect that striking your opponent more often than he strikes you would lead to you winning more matches. However, the correlation, so it is negative. The more matches you win, the less strikes you have on average, according to it's a very slight negative correlation, but it's interesting,
especially compared to last week's graph. Average offense percentage versus win-loss record that we showed last week. That correlation was
strong enough,
insanely strong, right? Mm-hmm. Compared to here, it's a slightly negative. So it's like, to me, it would appear that
strikes don't really matter.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, again, slight correlation, but yeah, it's sort of implying that strikes don't matter insanely much to winning a match, which is very, very interesting idea. You would think punching your opponent would be a helpful endeavor, but I guess maybe not.
Yeah, I was trying to think about how you could put that, how you could rationalize that. Mm-hmm. I suppose you could say that wrestlers that are striking too much, that are taking the easy road and just hitting their opponent rather than working into more complex maneuvers, are wasting their time. They're not using their minutes effectively, and then their opponents are able to take advantage. That's all I really think of to put that into perspective.
Yeah, it goes to something to say that like it goes to say that doing flashy wrestling moves may be better, you know,
Mhm.
than just normal punches and kicks and whatnot. I wonder if there's any correlation in terms of strike downs. You know,
Mhm.
because of course you can punch your opponent, but a
Yeah.
harder strike that will knock them down, maybe there's a correlation there. There's something very
Why
different.
don't we explore that next week?
Ooh, more teases. This is what I love. Next week. Next week on Wrestling Statistics. Yeah. The two difference in these charts is very interesting. The fact that there was a strong correlation last week to a very slight negative correlation
Mhm.
it is very interesting. I mean, obviously, you have some standouts here that I'm slightly surprised that Chris Jericho's leading the pack, but of course, he only had one match
Yeah.
in 2020 so far. Orange Cassidy all the way in the back there, which is correct. Is all I'm
Orange
gonna say.
Cassidy isn't putting the work in. Who'd have thunk it?
Hey, but he's at 0 of win-loss records, so he's
Mhm.
perfectly fine.
Yeah, he's doing all right.
He's doing pretty good. Yeah, there's some people here, obviously, in the scatter plot that are very interesting. Of course, Moxley, sort of, in the middle of the
Mhm.
pack when it
Yeah.
comes to striking, of up the upper half, and of obviously winning a bunch of matches. There's people down here like Joey Janela, Trent, Chucky T, QT Marshall that are again sort of in the middle of the pack, but
Mhm.
desperately losing. Yeah, it really goes to show that like maybe strikes are not the most important thing to winning a match, um, which is very
Yeah.
interesting.
What's also interesting about this chart is that anybody who has used less than 100 strikes per hour
Hmm.
has breaks even or has a positive win-loss record.
Oh yeah, that's a great point. I mean, you're looking at Pac, Sean
Mhm.
Spears, MJF, Darby Allin, Orange Cassidy, all of whom which respectively 1-3-3-3-0
Yeah.
in their win
I
loss
mean,
records.
the caveat to mention here is I've excluded any wrestler who has less than 20 minutes one-on-one ring time. So there will be guys that presumably, one would guess, that have just, gone into matches and been squashed. But out of the guys that have wrestled for a substantial amount of time, none of them have under 100 per hour.
Another disgrace to the great Fabu Andre. There's what are you doing here, Craig? I mean, where's the Fabu Andre love?
Sorry, can just pause for a second. What does Fabu Andre look like?
I,
As you're such a big fan.
I was looking it up.
Fraud.
I was looking it up, and I went to I typed in Fabu Andre, looked at the Twitter, and it came up as a female wrestler. And I
All
was
right.
like, I'm pretty sure John Moxley did not wrestle this lady, who does a beautiful springboard moonsault, by the way.
Ah,
Um,
right.
she
Maybe
is.
maybe your pal Fabu Andre should take notes.
Yes, they are a fabulous butterfly, is what this gimmick is. Wait, hold on. I should take that back. Actually, I don't know. Was this the same wrestler? Now I'm very confused. Okay, I'm gonna spend the next 10 hours diving deep into this. Maybe it was the same wrestler. Maybe I was confused. Oh, it was on Dark. That's why I don't quite remember because I
I
actually
think you
haven't.
might be spending too much time on Fabu Andre.
It is
I
the
don't.
same wrestler. I was
I
incorrect.
suspect that's not what the people.
I was incorrect. Fabu Andre is not a late female. She is a um uh they are gender. I'm getting screwed. I'm getting screwed by genders. Oh no. Oh, I read it all wrong. I'll say they have a beautiful springboard moonsault where they faced and lost to John Moxley.
Okay.
I'll do my best to reverse out of this one. Oh god. Craig, take me out of this. Please save me.
Oh, I don't even know how at this stage.
Oh no, I'm too far gone. Oh
So
no.
yeah, when you look at the kind of top five strikers, we've got Jericho, Daniels, Sabian, Archer, and Dustin Rhodes. And I suppose to highlight the point even more, out of those five, only Archer and Sabian have positive win-loss records. So it's not really proving to be the best tactic.
Again, though, calling back to last week, Something about Kip Sabian. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, he features a lot. He gets a lot in his matches. He comes out quite highly for a lot of these things.
Yeah, it's like Kip Sabian, according to this, on the same playing field as Lance Archer.
Hmm.
Which is, I mean, obviously Kip Sabian's matches are way longer than Lance's, but
Yeah.
wild, wild that Kip Sabian is still just the consistent what's the word you used it anomaly
Hmm.
in all of these graphs is Kip Sabian is just always it feels like he's sticking out like such a sore thumb.
Yeah, so I mean, like Kip Sabian, out of the guys that have wrestled for over an hour, he's easily the um, I don't know, most proficient striker, but like he's got the quickest strike rate. He's striking the most in his matches.
Let's move on. Let's start talking about the next lineup. Let's talk about these AEW League tables. As we get closer and closer to Double or Nothing, obviously we're going to see more and more matches announced, more and more titles defended, potentially defended, I should say. And there's a lot to look forward to. Let's look at the sort of league standings that you've presented again at ProWrestlingMusings.com, Craig. Looking at the male singles division, you were correct last week. We were sort of postulating who might be the next contender for the title. I said MJF, and you correctly suggested Brodie Lee. So, you can easily take that
Hmm.
victory lap.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't. It was just kind of looking at the table. Who would like who could you justify it with the numbers? And they have been squashes, but Brody Lee up in fifth in the male singles division. Ahead of him is Kenny Omega, Lance Archer, Cody Rhodes, and John Moxley. So two of those are fighting each other for the TNT title, whereas Kenny Omega is a tag champ. So next in line would be Brody Lee.
And even then, you're looking at next week's matchup of Brodie Lee versus Christopher Daniels.
Uh-huh.
If you suppose that Brodie Lee gets a victory, then he's now going to be tied for third.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. So yeah, a lot of people were um, quite kind of annoyed that Brody Lee had been given it, and then you've got that the kind of well-trodden path of this is just two WWE guys, because WWE owns every single wrestler that they ever employ.
Even
Um,
Yoshitatsu?
I don't know who that is.
Exactly.
But yeah, it's fine. It makes sense. Although if like maybe it's too soon for Kenny Omega John Moxley rematch, but if Adam Page isn't going to be around, there's Kenny Omega's been putting on great matches, more kind of substantial opponents as well.
Yeah, very interested to see. But yeah, Brodie Lee, of course, against John Moxley is what's happening at Double or Nothing.
Yes.
Next up, of course, we're looking at the female singles division. Very interesting enough. Of course, we have a next week. We have or upcoming Wednesday. There is a fatal not fatal four way dance, whatever they're calling it.
Mhm.
Match. Hikaru Shida, Chris Statlander, Penelope Ford, and Britt Baker. Um,
Right. Okay.
I can hear it. I can hear it in your voice.
Hikaru Shida has wrestled 8 times in 2020. She has won 7 of those matches. The one that she lost, I believe, was a fatal 4-way number one contenders match. The one that they no, it wasn't the number one contenders match. It was a fatal 4-way women's championship match. When they double booked Chris Statlander and she couldn't take part.
Mm-hmm.
Why? What is the purpose of these rankings? Why on earth would you make Hikaru Shida take part in a fatal 4-way match for the number one contendership when she has a win-loss record of +6 in 2020? Penelope Ford, who's also in it, +1. Britt Baker, evens 0. Chris Statlander, -1. Why is Hikaru Shida having to take part in this match? Surely she's already earned that spot. I know we don't get to have a match to prove that, but I don't know. It's just wins and losses are gonna matter. We're not gonna insult your intelligence. I don't know how intelligent do you think your audience are that this makes sense.
No, I mean that is all true. That is all true, Craig. It is astounding that Hikaru Shida is 88% positive in her win percentage.
Mm,
She's above Nyla Rose, right? Nyla Rose is 83%.
yeah.
Um, she's dominating the division, and yet she is still having to fight in these sort of fatal four way, sort of prove yourself.
Mhm.
I mean, the fatal four way in itself is not really a number one contenders match. It's sort of, I guess, implied that the winner will probably challenge Nyla Rose. But even then,
Yeah.
it's not like
I think
fully.
have they not called it a number one contenders match?
Yeah, at that point, why not call it?
No, but have they? I thought they had called it a number one contenders match.
I'll do the double check real quick, but I don't think they did.
But like, so the rankings are just being used backwards then, because so what is going to happen here is if this is a number one contenders match, Hikaru Shida is going to win because I mean they could have her. It would make more sense for her to lose now, so that there's some kind of pushback that why am I not getting the title match? Why is the company making me do this? It would be difficult because she's a babyface, but I think you can still be a babyface and have that gripe. But if she wins this, and this is a number one contenders match, fatal four way, essentially the rankings just become spoilers.
To say it, looking at AEW's Twitter account, next week on Dynamite, it's a four-way match with Hikaru Shida, Penelope Ford, Chris Statlander, Dr. Real, Britt Baker, DMD. That's it. No number one contenders tag to it. Just the fatal
This is
four-way.
awkward.
Just the fatal four-way.
Okay, well,
I mean, no, even then, even if it's like
do your homework.
the winner of this match will potentially get it, sort of that implied thing that sometimes
Yeah,
they do. Even then, it's like,
again, that kind of comes back to the rankings shouldn't be spoilers.
mhm.
And again, like Hikaru Shida could let's say Britt Baker pins Penelope Ford.
Correct.
Then um, when you're making your title match for Double or Nothing, it should still be Hikaru Shida because if Britt Baker wins, she's now on what +1, and Hikaru Shida's still on +6.
Yeah.
You know, the rankings mustn't become spoilers because that is just all kinds of missing the point of like sports centered wrestling promotion.
Is there any argument to, going with that sort of idea of Britt Baker pinning Shida?
If Shida gets pinned, there's more of an argument that somebody else can get that spot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, Hikaru Shida should definitely get the title match. They were sort of teasing the idea. Remember when they did that video package? They were sort of teasing the idea that Hikaru Shida is like this dominant force in the women's division who has not yet challenged. And so there, to me, I was like,
They've mentioned it now, yeah.
knowing the stats and knowing the actual numbers behind here, me thinking like, I wonder if that could maybe be a story point of like what is happening. Why is Shida getting all these wins but never being able to challenge? Who in the booking committee, whoever, whatever gods they are, have not allowed Shida into that sort of that pool, which then there's the issue of like, well, then your booking committee's bad because Hikaru Shida is obviously the number one contender.
WWE, isn't it? Kind of nefarious authoritarian figures.
Yeah, she has been. Yes, it's like who is it? Jack Whitehall, Billy Gunn, whoever's in your booking committee. I don't know what they're doing, but they're just sleeping on Shida over here.
Yeah, and I don't know. It's odd. I mean, my guess is that she wins on Wednesday and gets the title shot.
Correct. I'm in the same boat. I mean,
which is fine. I thought it was a number one contenders match, which is more muddled. But if it's not, and it's just another platform to spotlight Shida, that's less problematic. But yeah, it's still slightly having the rankings as spoilers rather than kind of a real sports-based thing.
And real quickly, looking at the male tag division, of course, there is Hangman Adam Page, who has been sitting out due to the quarantine, of course, smartly so. We don't know, obviously, if he will be returning for Double or Nothing. It was acknowledged on air that he's been sitting out for the past couple weeks due to the quarantine. But so we don't know exactly if he is going to come back at any point to defend the titles. But looking at the rankings here, do we think at all that, if the titles are defended, who do we think is going to be, challenging for those titles?
Well, they've got Dark Order, 5 wins. Similar to their leader, they were kind of all squashes on Dark, or insignificant tag teams on Dark, but nonetheless they're up there in second. You were saying that they're not based in America.
Yes, Dark Order, to my knowledge, are Canadian based, which,
okay.
due to the current pandemic, might be an issue of travel.
Yeah. So, I mean, Best Friends have benefited greatly from the kind of empty arena shows, and are positioned kind of as the next strongest tag team. So it looks like if they can get Page back in the building, that it'll be Chucky T and Trent. But I don't know. My guess would be that that's perhaps wishful thinking. I don't know what's going to happen with Kenny Omega at Double or Nothing, but I'm not convinced he'll be tagging with Adam Page.
Would you be okay with Omega defending the titles alongside Matt Hardy?
I don't think so, because that story is just so strong and people are so into it. I mean,
That story being Hangman Adam Page's story.
yeah. I don't know. I don't know. It almost feels like a betrayal. Probably being a little melodramatic there, but like, I don't know. It just, yeah. They were entertaining last week. They could do another one of those matches.
Well, now that you said the word betrayal, I'm thinking about it. Actually, I think Omega defending the titles with Matt Hardy would actually coincide with the story of Adam Page feeling neglected by the Elite.
Yeah, do you know what? You're absolutely right.
Like, he would come back, like, and let's say,
or Matt Jackson.
yeah, same thing.
Because it's been the Matt Jackson and Adam Page thing.
Mm-hmm.
I know, Nick, you were saying that Nick will be at home because of his newborn, and that's perhaps why Matt isn't there either, because they live kind of
weirdly together.
Yes, kind of together. But if they can socially distance, bring Matt Jackson back and have him tag with Kenny Omega, and have him kind of talk about, oh, you've got a real tag team partner now, Kenny, tag team specialists, etc., and kind of, because the best thing about that Adam Page Elite, kind of the friction there, was the interactions between him and Matt were incredible.
Yeah. There's also the idea that, like, what happens if they lose?
Yes, that's interesting as well.
Whether it be Matt Hardy, whether it be Matt Jackson or whatever, what happens if they just
of Page having to mail the title?
Oh, that's heartbreaking. That's such a heartbreaking tale. Oh man, I would feel so bad if it's just he has to mail back the title. Puts a stamp that's like 2 Dark Order or something, or 2 Best Friends, 2 Philadelphia.
There's
oh my god,
layers of story, actually, if they would choose to capitalize on that.
Oh my god, yeah. Either way, no matter who it is, if whether they lose or win, just defending the titles, with Adam Page not being there, it works. It like weirdly works on that same sense. I do also like the idea of it. Say it again.
You've changed my mind. I agree. It could work.
And I am now thinking the idea of, like, it actually could also work if it is Matt Hardy, because the idea is that, like, I guess the Elite just allowed a guy in, sort of Matt Hardy
Yeah,
into the
yeah.
Elite. We don't know it. He's a broken person. He's multiple personalities.
Oh, but
It's
now
like,
I've thought of the Matt Jackson thing. That's what I want. I just think that like Matt Jackson could be really smarmy and kind of there could be a lot of
I agree.
quite rewarding comments there.
I agree. I think if they can't get Matt Jackson, Matt Hardy will work. But if you can get
Yeah.
Matt Jackson, use him.
Oh, if you can't get Matt Jackson and it's Matt Hardy and they kind of lean into the DDT style stuff that they did last week, can you imagine best friends versus Hardy and you were saying about seeing Hardy and versus Chucky T earlier. Imagine the best friends versus Kenny and Matt Hardy in a kind of silly kind of match like
DDT.
they just did.
Yeah. Man. Yeah, because I was just saying, I was like, there's something about Matt Hardy and Chucky T, which is just it's like the delusional person is really what it is.
Yeah.
That's really just what I want to see. And then obviously Omega Trent have had several matches that have just been outstanding. So
Yes,
I think that's a very good match. That maybe that's the match they're leading towards a Double or Nothing. Who knows? We doubt. I mean, Dark Order might be travel hardened, and then Natural Nightmares. You could argue that Dustin Rhodes is injured. For the Lance Archer match. So Best Friends, according to these league standings, might be the next challengers against some team, if there is one. There also could just be a number one contenders match. If they, Best Friends
tag teams are thin on the ground at the moment.
Yeah, Best Friends. I think it was Tony Khan said that Best Friends legitimately were the only established tag team that they had during those Atlanta tapings. So they obviously greatly benefited. They potentially could get a title shot out of it, which is awesome for them.
Yeah, but it's a shame for the people that were excluded by circumstances or admirable choices.
Yeah, but if a nice little thank you, I guess, is what it's going to ultimately be.
Tricky one to navigate.
All right, well then, that's it for this week's episode. We're going to can this sort of discussion about the NXT title matches. Maybe we'll discuss it next week, seeing as, time permittings. Who knows? Maybe it's be too old of a discussion. Maybe it will explode in the wrestling world. I guess actually, no. A good week, we might be able to preview AEW Double or Nothing next week. Maybe that's what we're going to do. I'm not sure. Who knows? The world's going to change in a week, so it's hard to tell. But yeah, so thank everybody for listening to this week's episode of Wrestling with Statistics. We thank you so much. If you like what you heard, you, of course, can subscribe to this podcast feed that you're listening to, or, of course, the YouTube channel to get more episodes when those are released every Monday. Forgot what day it is today. Every Monday. Anything else to say to the kind folks, Greg?
I really liked the YouTube version of this last week. So if you have just listened to the audio, the YouTube version works really well because you're listening to what we're saying, the stats we're talking about, and then they're on the screen in front of you, which works really nicely.
Yes, you can. There will be a link to the YouTube version, presumably, if I remember to do it, in the podcast description. But of course, you can always go to Hit the Books podcast on YouTube. There's links somewhere. The links are out there. You already just find it and look it up. Hit the Books podcast on YouTube. There'll also be a link on our Twitter page at Hit the Books Pod, is where you can find my wrestling Twitter page, and you can always find Craig at PW Musings on Twitter as well. Anything else, Craig, before we go?
ProWrestlingMusings.com as well if you want to see all of this kind of thing in one place. It's worth an explore.
Yes. Yeah, you have a great series happening right now for greatest matches of all time.
Yes, check that out. John Cena versus CM Punk statistics and some kind of analysis graphs for that. And that's a match that I quite a lot of podcasts are talking about when they got back into wrestling. It's often that match that's spoken about. So yeah, have a look at that.
Yes, have a look at that. And that'll be it for this week's episode of Wrestling with Statistics. We'll be back next week with our special guest, Fabu Andre. No. I mean, if we can get Fabu Andre, I'm bringing him on. You know for a fact I would be. Thank everybody for listening to this week's episode of Wrestling with Statistics. We'll see you next week. Goodbye.